All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Ashley Little, and today I'm joined by Shawn Bowen and Jacob McPherson. Cameron Peters will be on a little bit later, so you'll see him pop up somewhere in the middle. And this is Wholesaling Out of the Box. We are back for the second part of Chapter 8 of Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Chris was an FBI negotiator for 24 years before he retired and started the Black Swan Group. Now he teaches his skills to individuals and groups so they can learn how to better negotiate in all areas of their professional lives. So we realized after we finished recording the last episode that we still had a little bit more to say about body language. So I'm going to throw it over to Jacob so that he can talk to you about that, his thoughts on that.
Yes. So for anybody who listened to the last episode, we talked quite a bit about tonality because the majority of the stuff that we do in the acquisitions realm tends to be over the phone initially, right? So it's very rare that you happen to be out and about, all of a sudden you start talking about what you do, and then all of a sudden a seller pops up and says, hey, I'm looking to sell my house. How can you help me? Right? So we spoke a lot to tonality because of that. I think 99% of our first conversations with sellers are over the phone. However, there is that portion where once you get to a point where the deal is close enough, right? The numbers are close enough over the phone where you think it makes sense to set up a property walkthrough. Now body language is coming into play. So when it comes to body language, most people can tell, right? Most of us are good at reading other people when it comes to what their body is actually telling you. So some examples of that, right? When I'm initially walking up to a customer's door or a seller's door, right? I always stand a few feet back so that I'm not overly aggressive, right? And then they go ahead, they open the door, and you can usually tell, are they creaking the door open? Are they opening it all the way? Do they seem like they're inviting? Do they seem like they're a little closed off and guarded, right? Most of them are going to be guarded because they don't really know you other than the conversation that you had. And then throughout the course of your conversation and walking around the house and getting them to open up, asking and using those open-ended questions to get them to just talk, right? All of that should start to open up their body language in some way, shape, or form. So some of the ways that I can tell that is if somebody is directly facing you, right? So do they have their arms crossed? Are they turned away, right? That's all signs of closed body language, which means that they're likely not being receptive and listening to what you're actually saying. So if you come across some of these cues, the best way to combat that is to ask another open-ended question because it gets them or reinvites that seller to open back up. So usually at that time, right, if a guy or a woman has their arms crossed and then all of a sudden you ask them an open-ended question, they start talking more. Well, sometimes the arms come down, right? That's when you know that, okay, their comfort level has opened back up and now we're back to where we need to be. And those are the types of cues that we look for when we're actually on the walkthroughs themselves. There are some great books on body language. There's actually another one that was written by an ex-FBI negotiator, oddly enough, and it's called What Everybody is Saying. And if anybody has, if anybody has read that book, or more specifically, if you have not, I would recommend that. That's a great book to get started as far as what to look for. In that specific case, they go into more interrogation when it comes to that. So it's the idea of looking at the person across the table from you. But some really great stuff overall. There's a couple other books that we can get into later, but maybe we can go ahead and throw some comments up at the end of this and I'll share a couple others that I've read through personally. But just something quick, since we didn't touch on it last time around, I wanted you guys to know that that is extremely important when you actually get into a walkthrough. And if you're not familiar with it, definitely do some research and take a look at it. It will make you better and you will start to pick up some small cues that will help you in your negotiation with the seller.
And what body language are you presenting when you knock on the door and ask for someone's wife?
Oh, just don't do it. Just don't. It doesn't matter what your body language is at that point. If an older gentleman answers the door and you ask for his wife, I don't know that body language matters.
Get your ass out of here.
Just don't do
face language.
Yeah,
I'll speak on that a little bit too. Body language is something I picked up on a long time ago when I first started. Really, actually, I won't say younger, but probably like late 30s when I was in the contracting world and starting to learn more about this kind of stuff and then reading books that people were talking about. And some of the big cues that are really big, and this is definitely important when you're walking through the property and or sitting down in somebody's living room, right? That's their personal space. Where do you put yourself, right? Do you put yourself in, you let them sit down first, and do you put yourself across from them, or do you put yourself at a caddy corner, like 180 degrees, right? And the answer to that is you do not put yourself directly across from them. You put them off to the side. Body language is, we're talking about what Jacob is like directly on versus caddy corner, right? Versus why is that person directly facing you, or are they not, right? So is it more comfortable? The other ones that you start seeing is people that, if you start, we'll get into this point. So this is like the part of a liar, and like, are people lying? Some things that happen is people will start messing with their ears as they're talking. They'll pull on their ear. And then what that is a physical sign of is they don't even believe what they're saying themselves, which is why they're playing with their ear. All right. Another one is people will start talking, and as they start to talk, they'll cover their mouth like this as they're talking. They don't believe what they're saying themselves, right? It's a reaction that the body does, and the brain triggers your hand to come up and block what you're saying because you don't even believe it yourself, right? So pretty fascinating stuff. Talking about the part with your arms being crossed, that's really good. How do you get that to uncross, right? So maybe you're walking through a home and you've got a seller that's either reserved with their hands in their pocket, right? Just walking around, very kind of stand backish. And the way to do that is you've got to have them doing something that gets their hands out of their pocket to interact. So one of the things that I used to do is I would take the flashlight and I would hand it to them and have them shine in the spot where I had to go, because I would ask them, hey, can you point it over here? Can you point it over there? It would require them to be interacting with me, right? So these little things were cues that would unlock things that were happening. And then if you're sitting down at a negotiation table, what does it look like when somebody's sitting to you on maybe their legs are crossed? That's, like Jacob said, that's a very I'm closed off to you feeling. Doesn't feel as though they're open. How do you open that back up? Right? So if you're sitting at the table and you're talking about paperwork and the seller's sitting back, they're not really comfortable with it, you do something that puts it on the table that requires them to pick it up. Whether that be a pen, whether that be the piece of paper itself, right? Pulling the paper out 2 pieces at a time. Hey, I'm going to give you this. We're going to go over this together and review it. So instead of going line for line, it's forcing them to hold it up in front of them and look at it, right? Fortunately, these days we have a lot of electronic stuff. So, hey, you can actually pull this up on your phone and read it, or we're in front of each other. We can go through this physical documentation, right? So a lot of different cues there, and they're way, way more, but those are some of the ones that really stood out to me when I was doing this. But when I was the guy going on the appointments and doing all this kind of stuff that these guys are doing nowadays, and it really does work. But it's recognizing that as you're on the appointment and knowing how to counter it, and or it's almost like you're playing chess, right? How do I make a move here to make that move go there? It's a very unique game that you play. So very good talk and bringing that back up. I'm glad we touched back on that. That was a good one. Anything specifically there, Ashley, for you?
Not really, other than to say, if I'm at a table and I'm crossing my legs, it's probably more because I'm short and I can't touch the ground all the way. So also beware of that.
Body height. Got it.
Yeah. Body height is also important when reading body language.
Well, so actually that brings up a really good point. One thing to just touch back on really quickly, guys. So they always talk about incongruities when you're talking about body language, right? So the idea is that you have to have congruence across the board. So that's congruence between the words that are coming out of your mouth, the tonality associated with it, as well as your body language. If any of those is not matching up or is incongruent with the other two, then you know that you may have a slight issue. So just something to keep in mind.
For those of you that listened to the last chapter, that was the word Shawn couldn't say and didn't know what it meant, was incongruent.
Big words, man. Y'all are jacking me up over here. I'm simple-minded.
Okay. So I think that's it on body language. Let's go over the rule of 3. So Shawn.
Yeah, so let's touch on this. This is one that I do pretty well with. I think, Ashley, you had something you wanted to speak to about that. So do you want to use that first?
Yeah, it was mostly about what you do with the rule of 3. And I will say sometimes as I'm listening to your phone calls, it annoys me a little bit just because I'm trying to get to the point, but you keep using this rule of 3. And I'm like, oh my God, why do you keep asking them the same question? But I know why you're doing it. It's just when I'm trying to get through a bunch of phone calls or listening to them, it's not as easy to understand. But one of the big things you do is you say something like, okay, so we're going to get this contract signed tonight, right? Yes. you say something else, and then, okay, so we're going to get this contract signed tonight, right? And then you go through and you do that rule of 3, and they've already given the affirmative several times at that point by the time you're done with your call. And I always walk away with, man, I need to get that contract signed tonight. But so I'm sure that they have a similar feeling.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, we can definitely move to that because I use that a lot. So the outlay here is the rule of 3. Get them to say yes 3 times to improve buy-in and guarantee implementation. Get them to give you a commitment, use a label and a summary to get that's right, and use calibrated how or what questions to address the implementation. So ask questions to determine what success will look like. Example would be, what do we do if we get off track? So one that I want to use and actually kind of talk to it for a quick second was, if we're talking about getting paperwork signed in a timeline, one that I always do is, okay, so we're going to go ahead and get that doc signed tonight. And then tomorrow morning, we'll get over to the attorney. Yes. And I ask it that way because I'm giving what I want, right? I'm giving the answer that I need for them to agree to. And I'm not asking in a yes or no question because I end the statement or question with the answer that I want, right? So I can reword that as they go back through as an objection comes over the table, right? Hey, yeah, I can do that, but I got to get my attorney to look at it, my dog, my cat, my friend, whoever needs to look at the doc, right, to agree to it. Yeah, not a problem at all. So they'll go ahead and look at it tonight. And let's say it's the attorney, whether it's the attorney, your friend, whatever, whoever has to review this doc with them to make them comfortable. That's the way we talk about it. All right, so you'll go ahead and get them to review with you looking at it, and then we'll have it back tomorrow afternoon before 5. Yes? So now we've given a deadline. Right? We've given their objection an answer, we've hurdled it, and brought into the end result we need, right? This is a timeline. So I'm getting timeline commitments with this. So the part that they're talking about to improve buy-in and guarantee would be like when we talk about repairs. And the way I like to do that is we say, all right, so it doesn't sound like the house needs a lot of work, but can you agree that it probably would be fair for $40,000 to $45,000 worth of work? Yes? It's almost like a parrot, right? It's like I'm throwing out a statement to get the answer, to get them to repeat it back to me, right? And there are not too many times do we get the ones where they're like, well, no, I mean, you get them every now and then, right? No, I got a buddy. I got a guy that can do it for less, right? So we do get those, but the idea here is that we're getting that yes so that they do get the buy-in and we do get the commitment that we want.
I think but I think you're sort of relying on the automatic mirroring that people do, because we talked in the mirroring chapter about how people do this automatically without realizing what it is. And by asking a question the way you're asking it, saying, we're going to get this contract signed tonight, right? Or yes, that's you're expecting them to mirror you.
Correct.
And by doing that, they're affirming it not only to you, but to themselves. And they have that in their head now, that they've said, or in some respects they've told you that they're going to do this, so they're going to try to do it. So I find that really interesting, not only using mirroring as it is, but using it against quotes people as well,
to the benefit, I would like to say.
To the benefit of
the end result. All right. Let's go over this for a hot second. So where do you guys feel like, Cam, talk to your use of 3. Do you feel like you use this and it comes in play?
I'd say maybe not specifically. The closest I do, I will repeat, summarize what we've talked about. I'll definitely do that and summarize what the next steps are. I don't know if that counts as 3 because that's usually just two things, right? But at the end of a conversation, I'll summarize, you know what I mean? Kind of what you said. All right, so it sounds like we're good here with the purchase price of $90,000. I'm going to go ahead and send paperwork over an email. That's going to come from HelloSign, yada, yada. If you would, it sounds like it. You'll be able to look over that tonight. Let me know if you have any questions, but it's really easy to sign it and go through it. But if you have any questions, be sure to get back on the phone with me. Now, following that, we're going to get this over to the closing attorney, and so I will go that route.
Okay.
So the rule of 2.
Rule of 2. Okay. A little different there. Ashley, do you feel like this plays in with any side of your house? I know Jacob doesn't really use it as much. So do you feel like anything that you use? And you're muted.
I'm muted. Um, not really. I can't think of anything off the top of my head other than what I discussed last chapter, which was sort of ending calls with a summary, with a summary of the calls to action. So, okay, we need to get this assignment sent out and we need to get an EMD over, right? And that's sort of, just me doing that a couple of times, but it's not necessarily in a rule of 3. It's just me trying to make sure all expectations are clear.
Nice. Okay.
I will say one thing about this as well, actually, just to make sure that we're all on the same page about it. So one thing that we talked about, and this was in an earlier chapter, I think it was, I want to say it was chapter 4, right? Start with no. And as part of that chapter, it's beware, yes. So one thing I do want to point out for anybody who may not have listened to past episodes or has not covered that chapter yet, it's very important that when we're considering this, going for the 3 yeses, that you've already gotten all the no's, right? And you've confirmed that you're not getting any counterfeit yeses. So because that's one thing that they talk about in chapter 4 is the idea of all these counterfeit yeses. So if you are not at a point in the conversation, you have not asked enough how questions or what questions, right? You have not gotten to the point where you can start asking for commitment, then you're not ready to start asking for these 3 yeses. I just want to clarify that because that's something that could be misconstrued if you haven't actually gone back and listened to that past episode on chapter 4.
Good bring up. Very good bring up. All right, so let's move our way into the next part of this, which is spotting liars. Liars will do the following: use more words than truth tellers, talk about him, her, it, one, they, and their, rarely I. This creates distance from the lie. And speak in more complex sentences to cover up the lie. This is one that I talk about all the time. For some weird reason, people get into real estate and they turn into a linguist, right? Or they turn into like talking back in crazy. I don't even know. Like, it doesn't even, I can't even say it now because it didn't even make sense, right? So they start going to I, thou, thee, and start sounding like an attorney's writing out of their mouth. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like Greek. So to me, it's just an immediate, like, what are you lying about? Or like, what are you bullshitting about? Is really what this comes from. The other one that they speak to here is spotting these, right? So I, me, my, versus we, they, them. So this is, well, that goes to decision makers, but I'm going to go back to the spotting liars part, because I feel like you will have somebody that, this is where I kind of feel like the spotting liars goes to this part. Yeah, I'm the one doing that and I'm the one in control, which actually they're not, right? And I don't know if you guys notice it with us, but like anytime I'm on Virginia Wholesale Real Estate or in these groups, it's always talking about, we can help you with this, or our team would like to do that, because I don't ever want it to be about me. I want it to be about the organization, right? Versus I feel like guys in that group, sometimes it'll be like, yeah, man, I've closed 20 deals this year, or I can do this, right? It's just such an example of maybe you did that, but I feel like right out of the gate, you didn't, right? This kind of goes back to the buyer side of this. And we're always asking about buyers that want to join a buyer's list. Cam's starting to see a lot of this now with that side of the house, where it's like, yeah, I did 21 deals last month or 21 deals last year. And you're like, awesome. Can we get a proof of funds? Well, let me see the deal first. And it's like, how do we get down this road without all the bullshit, right? That's where I feel like the I start coming in, and I did this, or my reasoning for doing that, right? And it just immediately is like, okay, are we dealing with a wholesaler, or are we just dealing with somebody that's being reserved? What are we dealing with? So I kind of feel like that's an example of where I see a lot of these, to talk about what he's referring to is, he says, talk about him, her, it, one, they, and their, rarely I, creates distance from the lie. So let's kind of go around here for a hot second and see what you guys talk about this. So Jacob.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that comes up with sellers a lot is when you're talking about getting a contract signed, right? So a couple of the sellers that we've dealt with over the last, year and a half or so, right, will tell you that they're committed and that they're gonna sign the contract, right? And then all of a sudden you'll send them the paperwork via HelloSign, and then they don't sign it. They viewed it, but they won't sign it. And then you start following up with that seller to ask them, hey, just want to make sure you receive the paperwork. Are there any questions that I can help you answer? What's going on, right? So, and a lot of the times those guys will come back with, oh, well, my attorney needs to review it, or, oh, I'm having an issue with the tenant and he's causing all these problems, so I've got to deal with that. And all it will be is just a misdirection. And almost every single one of those instances always ends up being the seller talking about a problem that they're having with somebody else. It's never them, and it's never, almost very rarely do they ever come back and be like, look, man, I'm going to get this done. I just need to make sure I come through this portion of it. If somebody told me that, then I would be more apt to believe them and understand that, oh, okay, well, it sounds like he actually does want to move forward based on what he's saying. But when people start giving you what sounds like an excuse, it's probably because it is. So I think that on the acquisition side of the house, that is probably the biggest thing that comes up that we deal with, I think, unfortunately, sometimes more often than not. So
I like it. Cam.
So I would relate this more with the spot and the liar on the disposition side of the house, and the sellers that randomly have stuff go missing from their house, and they call you up and they tell you this long story about how there's no possible way that anybody broke into the house because they've checked every window and they rechecked every lock and they made sure that every lock was latched, right? So it's like 3 times on the locks, right? And
too much detail, way too much detail.
Yep. I made sure everything was there beforehand. Now, I even checked the garage door because, the son had broke in there before, but it wasn't him because I changed the locks on the garage door. And this whole thing down to, a set of glasses that were in this cabinet. And I know that they were on the second shelf, and there was 9 of them. And, they were engraved and they were crystal. And, I don't know how much those are for, but and this all comes back to somebody who didn't even live in the house. So the fact that they know that they're on the second shelf in the cabinet and the house is just full of shit everywhere. No way, dude. No way. You're lying. But at the end of that long story, it's just, okay, so what are you looking for here? How can we move past this? Because we want to work with you. And to get to that point of, well, I got to get an appraiser, and I got to get a like kind, and the story continues after that. That's when instead of somebody just saying, hey, look, man, kind of got an uneasy feeling somebody might have been in the house because I think some things are missing. Not sure. Let me see if I can find some pictures. Just want to give you a heads up. That's probably the person that, maybe somebody stole his, whatever it might be. But that's a spotting of the liars, definitely on the dispo side. And it just comes with that whole elaborate story. Or even with my kids, they start telling you elaborate story and everybody involved, I smell bullshit. All right.
I like it. Ashley.
So I feel a little bit attacked right now because I am the person, I'm like Jacob, I'm way too wordy. I'm so bad at telling stories. I'm going to include every single detail that you never needed to know in your life. And it's not me trying to be nefarious or anything. It's just how my brain works. So then I'm always like, oh, do they think I'm lying? Like, I probably shouldn't have taken this long to tell the story. And then I get self-conscious and it turns into a whole thing. So
they're $20 into the story.
Pretty much. But Cam brought up a good instance, and I actually had something happen this weekend where we had a seller it's essentially a tenant who the garage door is destroyed. And she very succinctly sent me an email at like 1 o'clock in the morning, poor woman, and was like, yeah, a drunk driver hit my car, which pushed it into the garage at like 1 o'clock or, about an hour ago at midnight. How do we, like, I don't even know homeowners insurance. What are we supposed to be doing here? Like, I don't have pictures yet because it's dark, but I'll get some pictures for you tomorrow. And that's kind of, and then I ended up going over there and like that, it was rough, but just that kind of succinct, hey, this is what happened. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I've already been through hell trying to deal with this. I'm not willing to to put any more time and energy into it at the moment. But yeah, I think it goes back to kind of like what Jacob was saying in the beginning about incongruities and discussing, hey, words are hard.
One.
Discussing, even though I may be wordy, that might be the only thing that is weird about that. My body language, my tone, everything else might indicate that I'm telling the truth. Because I do think sometimes nervousness comes into play, and not just for me, but for other people too. They might be nervous because they really do think someone broke in, and now it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So just kind of taking in the whole picture to be able to know what's happening.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. So spotting the decision makers. How do you just spot decision makers? Watch for pronoun usage such as I, me, my, indicate the speaker is less important in the decision of the outcome. Why, they, them indicates the actual decision maker leaving their options open. And this is kind of where I was going before, as like the reason I do this, which I don't want people coming directly and say like, it's Shawn that made the decision, or I need to go to Shawn. I want those people to understand that there is a team behind it. I think that one of these we can use is when we're dealing with sellers and trying to figure out all parties involved, right? Versus you get the person that's just saying I and me when it's clearly a probate case. More than likely there's probably at least one more brother, sister, or some kind of heir to deal with. And the likelihood of it not being that is pretty low, but usually that comes out the gate. That comes out right out from the beginning. Yeah, like you said, I've got 9 brothers and sisters and I hate 5 of them, or like whatever it might be, is that it usually comes out ahead of time without even asking. But the ones that are trying to do underhanded game, right? Trying to sell the property off, thinking that they're going to be able to do it slick, that they can just get away by doing this and that there's just no way nobody would know. Those are the ones that are usually the ones we catch with that, well, I have the decision ability making for everything. There's nobody else involved at all. I've already pulled title myself. I, me. Like this is very red flaggish too. Who else is in the background that we don't know yet? Because you are saying a lot about I and me, right? And that's what I get out of that. So I think this is a spotting decision makers point is really on the front end. Not as much on the back end of the house for the buying side, unless somebody uses an LLC. We recently went through this where we had somebody that was using an LLC. They didn't understand how it operated. They thought it was just they could sign, but they didn't understand everything that comes with that. So maybe a little bit of that on the back of the house, but more on the front, knowing that the sellers have other heirs or family members they have to deal with. So anything you guys want to touch on that, or is that pretty quick?
Go ahead, Cam.
I think you can definitely, as you're talking about who all's involved in the sale, right? You can definitely tell when there's other people involved in the sale, but that one person that is the executor, although they might have, the 51%, or they might have the rights to sell the property. When they use that I a lot, and I had one of these about 6 months ago where it was just 2 brothers. It wasn't really that complicated. I got the feeling that they got along, right? But the guy that was the executor really was not in charge. He was not the alpha of the 2 brothers, right? And I didn't spot that until later, but I thought about it and I went back and I think that really sounds good to me. That really sounds good to me. Yep, that's really going to work. I think that's a good offer, Cam. I really appreciate what you did. Right? Brother totally trumped everything. You know what I mean? And there was none of that in the end, although that brother that I was talking to did have the rights to sell the property. The brother in the background definitely had more leverage in the relationship, right? So it's definitely, I should have cued in on those I's, and versus the we's. When you talk to those, it's, well, I mean, that sounds like that might work for us, but like I told you, more people involved. So I definitely want to talk to the rest of my brothers and sisters and make sure we are all on the same page, right? That person probably can go back to those brothers and sisters and totally get it all to work, right? But they're not going to say that up front. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Cam just said at the end. I mean, obviously, I hear it more on the acquisition side of the house, but it's exactly that. It's Because what people use that for, right? It's in every single negotiation that I've ever had, right? When you get to the point that you're asking for a commitment and whether or not you can put pen to paper, undoubtedly, unless it's already come up, the seller is always going to pull the, well, I've got to think about it, right? Which usually means I want to go back, like we are not sure what we want to do, right? We need to talk this over. We need to think about it. It's always the same thing. So it's natural for those decision makers to leave that as an out, so to speak, right, on the front end of the conversation, because they don't necessarily want to be pushed into making a decision just yet. So they may not necessarily want you to know that, which is why they want to reserve that right and reserve that as an option to be able to go back and say, well, I'm not the decision maker here, man, so I can't make a decision, right? We do that in our everyday lives when it comes to making decisions. And that's just something that is inherent in every single sale. So it makes perfect sense why people would say exactly that. So.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit. Shawn, you were muted, so if you said anything, we didn't hear it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about a time that we totally missed this, the decision maker sort of thing. I mean, we kind of knew, but kind of didn't. And it was a probate case, and it was a pretty big wholesale fee. All of a sudden, we ran title only to find out that there was a second brother involved who owned half of the property. And this second brother had also tried to sell the house on his own. So both brothers had tried to go kind of behind each other's backs. We think for the money based on everything that it came down to in the end. And there was just a whole lot of back and forth. And we just totally missed it. We missed that there was anyone else involved until title came back. I don't even think we knew that this seller had a brother. I don't think he ever even mentioned it in the calls initially. Yeah, Cam is the one that worked this. So if you want to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, it was definitely not mentioned at all, that there was another brother involved in this. And I think that for whatever reason, the two of them were trying to sell that property on their own and do their own thing. I don't know if we'll ever truly know the exact reason why, but yeah, it definitely was an I situation, I. And we had to find out the hard way on that one.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, so just remembering to really think about that. In the end, we were able to salvage the deal, and it really did just come down to money. But that's not always going to be the case. So yeah, it's important to know who the decision maker is. Moving on to using your own name.
This is a really good one. I like this one a lot, especially in the audible part. I don't know if he says it in the book. I don't know if it mirrors the book identically, but in the audible part, I love it. His example is that he's at his FBI school and they're all going out with the guys and the girls, having a night for some drinks after work all day. And he goes up to the bar to go get a drink. There's an open seat. And the guy next to him says, don't even think about it. And with him being like brand new negotiator right out of school, graduation time, he's all like, oh, this guy needs my help. So he leans over to him and is like, hi, I'm Chris. And the guy's all like, completely changes his tone. Right. So he goes into this completely different feel, completely like he just made himself a person instead of about the seat. Right. So he took the seat out of the equation and made it about the person that was getting ready to sit into it. And that's all Chris said was like, hi, I'm Chris. And he like just started talking with him. And next thing you know, he's sitting down, having a beer. And like, that's how he kind of like finished his talk with it. But humanizing, that's what he's doing here, is he's making himself humanized to a part of the discussion, right? So that could be as simple as, hey, my name is Shawn. I'm with Full Circle Investment Group. I was sorry, I might have the wrong number. I was calling you about 123 Main Street, right? Versus, hey, is Chris Johnson there? It's like, whoa, who are you? Like, why are you calling me? What's going on? This is weird. I don't like it already, right? Versus humanizing yourself and introducing yourself like normal people do, right? Hey, this is Shawn. I was calling you about this. Even on return calls, follow-up calls. Hey, Jacob, this is Shawn. You and I talked about 2 months ago. I think you were telling me about your daughter was having some birthday this weekend and we talked last weekend, right? This is humanizing the situation by using your name, using their name, and actually making a connection back to what are the other 20, 30 people they talked to? They had no clue who they are. They have no recollection. There was no something familiar to connect with, right? And I think we do a really good job of that. It's part of our sales process, right? Or our script, if you want to call it that, which we all follow the same thing. We all have a little bit of variation off of it, but nonetheless, we all follow the same sales process and it works every time, right? So I think it's a really good example in this book that he brings it up about using your name and why it matters so much. So let's take a quick second and go around the room and talk about that. So let's start with Cam.
Yeah, I definitely use my name when I start on the call, but I think another way to do this too is to humanize you as a person, right? To maybe talk about your dog or your, right? However it relates to the seller, right? So if the seller's talking about the kids, talk about the kids, or if you don't have kids, talk about a nephew, a niece, whatever it may be, right? And that's the way you humanize it back instead of just, you know what I mean? Just rolling on with it and sharing just a little personal piece to remind that person on the other end of the phone that you're just a person having a conversation, right? Looking to see if this is something that can work. That's the major way I do that. I don't know that, I definitely do what you're saying and the voicemails where my name is always in there. And if I can remember, if there's something I put in the notes about, hey, I mean, last time I checked, you were checking with your sister on whether you guys were going to sell the house, just following up with here, would see if you were able to reach out to Sharon. And Sharon, you know, if Sharon is the sister's name, sharing and sharing is messing me up. But sharing that piece, and that's why I write that note specifically. So I throw that personal piece back in the voicemail to make it seem like I somehow have this miraculous memory, and make that connection, right? So that's definitely the way I use this part.
Cool. Jacob.
Yeah, I think to go off of a little bit what Cam said. So when I receive a phone call, it's always, hello, Jacob speaking. And I'm announcing myself immediately as far as who I am when that person is calling me. So it's an instant, oh, okay, I'm talking to Jacob. Okay, got it, right? And then in addition to that, going forward with, as far as what Cam was saying is, you know, humanizing and making yourself real. So not only just talking about, you know, some of the situations that may help you relate to the seller, right? Those are always things that are important in sales because you want to be relatable and people like people that are like themselves, right? So it's one of the basic sales techniques or concepts, right? So, but the other way to do that, I know that one way that we're real over the phone is if I'm in the middle of cooking dinner for my wife and I'll say that, right? Like if a seller happens to catch me at a bad time or like, hey man, it's cool. Like I'm just driving down the road. Like I got a few minutes. What's up? Right? Or, hey man, I'm actually in the middle of cooking dinner. Would you mind if I gave you a call back in a half hour? Like, oh yeah, you're a real person and you actually have things that you do as well. Right? So it's just the idea of coming across as not fake, basically, right? And just actually being yourself. And I think that, I don't know why, but there seems to be a stigma out there that when the phone rings, like it's all important and you gotta be available and you gotta take the call right then and there. And that's just simply not true. So most people, especially if they're motivated, they're human as well, right? They're going to understand those things. So I think being okay with just being yourself and being true is ultimately going to go a longer way with the seller. And that's something you're going to find as you go.
Awesome. Ashley.
Yeah, just echoing what Jacob said, that when I answer the phone, I answer it, hi, this is Ashley, just as that humanizing aspect that you're dealing with, especially, I don't even say I'm with Full Circle or with Wholesaling Out of the Box or with anything, because we are a smaller company and you want to be available to the people that you're working with, whether it's sellers, buyers, joint venture partners. You want to be available to them and let them feel like you're approachable. So I think, yeah, using that does really help. It helps people engage a little bit more. You're not just like a faceless, nameless person on the other end of the line. Going in the reverse, I think it's also important to use their name. And it's something I'm trying to be better about. But I met someone recently who uses my name pretty regularly as we're talking. And at first I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I know it's a way for them to kind of be engaging me in conversation, and it makes the conversation feel more personal, more like they care. And so that's something that I want to try to get better about moving forward as well.
There's a sales statistic behind that, what you're referring to. So I always think about it like if you're out at a party, right, or you're getting introduced to somebody for the first time, there is an 80% chance that that person will like you more and remember you next time if you can just remember their name. So like literally you'll go out the very first time, right? You'll meet a guy, hey, this is Barry and his wife, Kim. Okay, cool. Well, maybe you forget it throughout the end of the night. Maybe you don't. But the next time that you go, if it's been a while and you guys aren't super close and you're able to walk back up to him and say, hey, Barry, hey, Kim, how are you? Literally, it's like a switch goes off in their head and they immediately are going to have a more likely chance that they're actually going to like you and remember you. So fun fact.
Yeah. I mean, there's just something so personal about names, even though, I mean, how many Ashleys are there in the whole world? But to me, or to everyone, just using and knowing that that is the thing that people call me by, it's like, oh, okay, you remembered this one little bit of information. It's a personal connection.
To start calling people number 5.
Number 5.
What's up, number 6?
Yeah.
I like the voicemails when it's like, you've reached 757-201-9679. Be like, hey, this is 757-239-6646. Give me a call back when you're ready.
Oh, I like this guy. He's got jokes.
I mean, like, I don't know. There are reasons behind it. But yeah, I don't want people to necessarily know. And I know my phone number's everywhere, I'm sure. Like a skip tracer could find it, whatever. But I'm also like, I don't think random people like telemarketers that call need to know that they got they got the right number. Like, I don't care if you consider me a number.
Right. All right, let's move on to the next one. So saying no 4 times. This is a good one. 4 steps to saying no that keep the negotiation going. Different ways of saying no 4 times. How am I supposed to do that? Your offer is very generous. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I just can't do that. Or I'm sorry, no. Using mirrors and open-ended questions in between the emphasize 3. That's very generous of you, but I'm sorry, I just can't do that. That price is more than fair, but how am I supposed to do that? And thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I'm sorry, but no. So you can line those up any way you want, but I think these are ones that I use like wholeheartedly a lot. Like, and then you guys talk about the recordings you listen to with me saying all this stuff. So yeah, this is something that's really big. Let's go around and talk about it. Jacob.
Yeah, I think, so if I'm being perfectly honest, this is something that I have to do more of. So because I will usually say no once, maybe twice when it comes to a seller offering me a number, I don't go all the way to 4. And the more and more I read this chapter and the more it keeps coming back to me, I'm like, damn it, I really need to start doing this. So, but I will comment on some of the things that you do, because especially the call that I just did for director's commentary. So okay. You're very, very good about going right at it. Like if a seller comes out and says, I want 120,000, you'll just be like, no, that number doesn't work. What if we do this? And then you'll counter it immediately. And there is no, the way that you say it, the tone and everything that you say and how just like short and sweet it is, like psychologically the seller's like, oh shit, okay, that number just doesn't work. Like it doesn't. Like there is no like little bit of like, does it though? Like there's no question. It's just, no, that number doesn't work. And then you'll counter it. And then, so one of the things that I would like to start doing, and I'm going to actually try this now that we're talking about it. So I'm going to try to go right at it like that. And then immediately start following up with, that's very generous of you, but that number just still does not work for me. What if we do this, right? So just the idea that you're saying no, obviously this is somebody that wants to do the deal, right? Somebody who is motivated, wants to get everything out from underneath them, but there's still ways of saying no psychologically that are still going to allow them to come down on their number. And you may not even necessarily have to give a number yet. So, and I know that that's something that you historically are very, very good at. I just need to get better at, but I love it. As far as these 4 questions are concerned, it's a no brainer.
Awesome. Cam.
Yeah, I definitely think the way that I use this here is to go about it and say, if they're at $100,000 or whatever it may be, right, and we're only going to offer 50, Like, well, I mean, I really need to get 100, right? And let's say we've already dissected and you've already got to the point where, are you talking? Sorry, I got distracted. See, I'm reading body language over here, and it wasn't the right time to read body language. It is what it is, right? So, so you get to the point where you just know that they might not be able to move off that number, and be like, look, I understand that that's your number, and that's where you need to be. I get it. I just got to tell you, from a business standpoint, though, it makes no sense for me to do that. Like, I will make no money. So I would hope you understand that in the end, I'm trying to make a profit. So it's not going to work. So I don't know if you have any room in that, but it's not going to work for me like that. And just totally pull away from it, right? And see where it goes from there. But that's the biggest way I use that, is just a total pull away.
Nice. Ashley, do you use this at all on your side?
No. The only thing that I would say is we've talked a lot over the last couple of chapters or a couple of episodes about the phrase, how am I supposed to do that? And I think this is like the only time when it would make sense to use it. Sorry. Now Cam's distracting me. But anyway, the phrase, how am I supposed to do that? This is a good time to do that when you're actually looking for a negative response, as opposed to when you're trying to get the seller, trying to build rapport, trying to get the seller to agree with you. And so I think this is the only time where it makes sense for that. But everything else, I'm not really trying to emphasize some of this stuff or to try to get those 4 steps or those 4 no's. By the time it comes to me, it's pretty much there. Everything is sort of good to go.
In a bag, on a plate, ready to go.
Yeah.
I like it. Awesome. So, guys, this is the end of this chapter, but the saying no 4 times is a really big thing. So if you can, as you're listening to this recording and or you're listening to the book or reading the book, really take the time to try to learn how to get these 3 to 4 to work with each other, because they're really powerful. Really powerful. It took me a while to get there, but once I did, I just realized how easy it was to keep it going and how it was just way, way smoother at the end of the conversation to make things go in the direction they needed to, right? And not at a disadvantage of the seller or myself, but just so we were all kind of going down the same path, right? So I think that's it, guys. This covers us up for this chapter. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So thanks so much, everyone, for listening to us discuss the second half of Chapter 8 of Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. We'll be back next week for Chapter 9. If you're enjoying our podcast or our YouTube videos, please leave us reviews or comments. Let us know what you think, what you want to hear and see in the future, or how wholesaling out of the box or Never Split the Difference has helped you in your business. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.